Hi everyone, my name is Malavika Rajkumar. I am the content lead of Nyaya. Today I'll be talking to you about the three zones, red, orange and green, which has commonly been going around in all news cycles. I'm sure you have a doubt yourself whether you are part of the red, green or orange zone, but not to worry. Today I'll be explaining to you all the activities that can be done in these zones. So let's start with what the extension dates are in the first place. There's a lot of confusion. So initially, the extension was for 21 days starting 24th March and it went on till 14th April. After 14th April, there was a further extension which then moved the lockdown till the 3rd of May. Now the latest extension is till the 18th of May, which is 2 weeks from the 4th. So let's look at what all activities are prohibited during this lockdown period, which is 2 more weeks from the 4th. So as per the guidelines again, which have been issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs, all the states, union territories and authorities have to follow these guidelines. And some of the common questions have been answered through these guidelines. Domestic and international travel is not allowed except for security purposes that the government will declare. Apart from that, movement by trains is not allowed except for certain exceptions. And as you must have seen, there are migrant workers and students now going home in special trains organized by the state government. Those kind of train travels are allowed, but not otherwise. Then interstate buses for public transport is not allowed. Metros are shut now. And movement of individuals. So if you or I have to go out to buy something, you can only go out to buy essential goods or for medical purposes. You cannot move around otherwise. The police will definitely stop and ask you why you're moving around. And if you actually violate any of these provisions also, you can be punished under section 188 of the Indian Penal Code with jail time and a fine. So you should be careful while moving around. All schools, colleges, educational institutions, coaching institutions, online trainings, all of them have been shut, except for certain ones which have been allowed by the MHA. Then hospitality services other than those for housing, health, police, government workers, army, stranded tourists, etc. are open. Otherwise, hotels are not running as of now. Hospitality services are not allowed to run. All cinema halls, shopping malls, any sort of cafes you want to go to, swimming pools, bars, auditoriums, all of these are shut as of now, even entertainment parks for that matter. Again, all social, political, religious gatherings or even academic gatherings are not allowed now. Then all religious places are also entry is not allowed, so you cannot actually go to these places of worship right now during this time. And even religious congregations where groups of people come together to pray, etc. are banned as of now. So let's look at what the red, orange and green zones are. So the Ministry of Home Affairs put out this order, which you can get on their website, this was put out on the 4th of May. It discusses three kinds of zones in India. One is red, one is orange and one is green. Now, depending on the zones, certain actions are taken. For example, in red zones, or they're commonly called hotspot districts, these are the districts which have active cases, doubling the rate of cases. It has surveillance going on, it has contact testing going on. So that means these are active areas of coronavirus. Then you have green zones, which are those districts with zero confirmed cases of coronavirus in the last 21 days. So only those places are green zones. Then there's orange zone. Now these are districts which are neither red nor green, which means it's not that active, but it's not that, but the number of cases are also there. So those are known as orange zones. So you can find the zone classification list online. You will see it in a lot of media publications also, but you can otherwise come to the Nyaya website if you want to see whether like certain states have zones. For example, in Delhi, East, South, southwest, north, all of these are red zones. While in Kerala, some areas have green zones. While in Bangalore, some of them are orange and some of them are green. You can see your district and see whether you are falling under a red, green, or orange zone. And depending on that, your movement is regulated. So, another important thing to note is that states and union territories have the power to classify a zone from red and classify a zone into red and orange zones, but they cannot say that a zone is not red or orange. This will involve the Ministry of Family and of Health and Welfare to also intervene, and the states do not have power to do this. States also have to see the classifications of red and orange zones based on the municipal corporations, whether the zones are within the jurisdiction of the municipal corporation or whether it's outside the jurisdiction of the municipal corporation. So depending on this, states also have the power to change the zones. So it doesn't mean that red zone will forever remain red. There are certain situations in which states can reclassify the zones. For example, it can move from a red zone to an orange zone in case the district, for example, let's say the district is classified as a red zone and there are no confirmed cases in 21 days. Then the district outside the limits of the municipal corporation can be moved to an orange zone. Another example would be an area district which is classified as an orange zone and there are no confirmed cases in the past 21 days. So these areas can then be labeled as green zones. Then, for example, in areas where outside the limits of the municipal corporations where there are no confirmed cases at all, again the classification can be changed from red to orange, but let's say the number of cases increase also, again states have the power to classify it. Now, specifically when you look at red zones, there are a lot of restrictions in these areas. But before that, let's look at what is known as a containment zone, which is very important. Now, containment zones are specifically these geographical areas where positive cases of coronavirus are found. Now, the sort of detail that happens in these areas is very strict because the number of cases are very high here. So you can check with your state government's website to see which areas in your state are containment zones. So from these containment zones, there are a lot of restrictions. For example, movement is definitely restricted. You cannot just move around. Like there are restrictions for movement for any non-essential purpose between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. in the morning. Let's say that you are a pregnant woman or a child below the age of 10 or a senior citizen above the age of 65. Then these classes of people also have to stay at home and they are not allowed to move out. People who are in containment zones are not allowed to even step out of their house in certain situations, and this will all depend on how the local authorities are handling it. There will always be police personnel around to ensure the movements of persons also don't happen. Outpatient departments and medical clinics also don't run in these areas because you will have doctors coming to these areas to test you and to conduct screen tests. Apart from that, these outpatient departments and medical clinics are there in red, green and orange zones, but if your specific area is a containment zone, then these will not be there. Now, what usually happens in containment zones is that there's a strict perimeter control. The police regulate the movement of people in and out. Everyone has to download the Arogya Setu app and put in their details so that their temperatures, their health details can be tracked. And there is a clear entry and exit point in these containment zones. So you can only enter from one point and exit from the other. And apart from that, every person entering or exiting a containment zone, there's a proper check. Then your details will be taken down, let's say if you're going into a zone. So let's look at, now this is what happens in a containment zone. Now let's take a look at what happens in a red zone. So as you know, like states like places like Delhi are completely red zones. Like there are places in Andhra Pradesh also, which many districts have been declared as red zones. So in these areas, no cycle rickshaws or auto rickshaws will be able to run. There won't be any taxi or cab aggregators, meaning no Uber, no Ola, none of these are supposed to work. No intra-district or inter-district buses, meaning buses won't move within the city and outside the city. Barber shops, spas, salons, all of these are shut in red zones. So if you want a haircut, you can't definitely get it in a red zone. And if you want to use autos and travel, that is also not allowed. So what are the permitted activities? Like what all can you do in a red zone? Does red zone mean that you're restricted completely? No, it doesn't. There are some activities which are permitted. For example, if you have a four-wheeler vehicle, you can definitely take it out and move around for getting medical supplies or buying vegetables, etc. But only two passengers can be there, and one has to sit in front and the other has to sit in the back. And when it comes to a bike or a two-wheeler, there can only be one person. That means a pillion rider is not allowed. The person sitting behind you is not allowed to sit behind you on a two-wheeler in red zones. Now, there was also a question on whether industries can run in red zones. Production units of which require continuous production can run. So manufacturing units of drugs, pharmaceuticals, essential goods, all of these will continue to run in red zones. And manufacturing of packaging material is also allowed. Construction activities in urban areas are also being allowed. And apart from that, for example, the jute industry can run with staggered times and social distancing norms. So all this is allowed in the red zone. Now, when it comes to construction, an important thing to note is that only in situ construction is allowed. That means where workers are available on site and no workers are required to be brought in from other states, only that kind of construction can happen. Meaning, let's say there's a construction for your building, you can only get people within the area, within Delhi. For example, if the construction is in Delhi, and you can't bring people from outside the border into Delhi for work. So let's look at what all shops are open. I'm sure you're very curious about this. In red zones, malls, market complexes and markets are all closed. They will not be open, so you cannot visit a shopping mall or any local market. But some of the shops that are allowed to be open are shops selling essential goods in markets and market complexes. So for example, in your market complex, if there's a provision store, that may be open, but the market itself won't be open. All standalone shops, neighborhood shops, and shops in residential colonies are allowed to be open. So if you are living in a flat that has a vegetable shop underneath, that can definitely remain open. And in rural areas, like except for malls, everything else is allowed to be open for essential and non-essential goods. Now let's look at e-commerce activities. Can you order from Amazon, Flipkart? Can you order things online? They are allowed only for essential goods, meaning like your daily milk, bread, vegetables, etc. So in red zones, if you're ordering from Amazon, you will only get essential goods. You won't get non-essential goods like headphones or a TV or any other gadget you want to buy. All of those are non-essential goods. Essential goods include food, pesticides, insecticides, you have seeds, etc. Like all the things you need for daily requirements. Now let's look at whether private offices can remain open. Yes, private offices can remain open, but only 33% of the strength is allowed to be in the office at a go. This again depends on the employer on how the 33% is chosen. And the remaining people have to work from home, and they will be considered on duty, and they will also be considered as employees who are getting their pay. So you should definitely talk to your employer about this. Government offices are also functioning. You have the police, prisons, departments, for example, home guards, civil defense, customs, emergency services like fire, disaster management, all of these are functioning. And in these activities that I've mentioned, if there's anything that has not been explicitly mentioned, or explicitly permitted, then they are considered to be open. Like, you should check with your state whether they've particularly closed down any particular area in your red zone. Apart from that, all the things that I have mentioned are allowed to operate with restrictions. Now, what happens in orange zone? Now, as I mentioned, orange zone is not a red zone, meaning there are no high number of cases, and it's not a green zone. That means for over 21 days, there were no cases. In orange zone is like an in-between, between both the zones. So in these areas, certain movement is allowed. All activity is allowed here, but with certain restrictions. For example, taxis and cabs like Uber, Ola, all of these are allowed to run, private taxis, etc. But you can only have one driver and two passengers in these areas. Then inter-district movement of vehicles and individuals are only done for permitted activities. So if you want to go from one district to another within your state, again, you should show that you're going for medical purposes or for essential goods. It's not, the activities are not without restrictions here. That's a little regulated, so you will definitely be asked why you're moving around. And four-wheelers can have two passengers behind the driver. That is allowed, so you can take your four-wheelers and two-wheelers and move around, but again with limited number of people. Buses will not function though, so you cannot go within your state and you cannot go outside your state even if you are in an orange zone. That is not allowed. Now let's look at what is permitted in a green zone, which is pretty important. So many areas, for example, in Kerala, northeastern states, all of these have been declared green zones, which means all activities are permitted here, except with two restrictions. One is that all the buses that operate, for example, the public transport that's operating, can only operate with 50% seating capacity, which means only 50% of the total bus crowd can actually get in at the same time. And bus depots again can only operate with 50% capacity. This is to ensure that there is no crowding in areas. And again, all activities are allowed in green zone, whether you want to buy liquor, whether you want to go to your shop, whether you want to go to areas nearby, take your own private vehicle and move around. There are no restrictions here as per the guidelines. But it is important to note that you need to check with your own state to see how movement is allowed in it. Because sometimes, despite these guidelines, the states also have the power to regulate the sort of movement that happens. So you should definitely take a look about that. Now there are, if you have any doubts, please drop comments, but there are certain other areas which people have commonly been asking about. Let's take a look at those. Now, one of the main questions that keep coming is whether you can actually get on a bus and go home, get on a train and go home. I'm sure you've been seeing a lot of news reports on this. You've been seeing that many people from Orissa have been sent back from Kerala, and many other states are actually moving the migrants around. This is allowed, yes, but with restrictions. Now, most of the trains that are being operated are operated by the state government. That means these are special trains to take people from one state to another. And what happens is when these people actually move, they are first tested and they are checked. It's checked whether they are asymptomatic, meaning whether they have symptoms of coronavirus or not. So there are a lot of equipments which these local authorities will use to check, like thermal scanners, etc. Now, after they reach the place of destination, let's say they're traveling by train from A to B, when they reach B also, they will be under home quarantine until they're tested negative. And if they are tested positive, again, that area may turn into a containment zone. You may be asked to go into quarantine, or you may be asked to stay within your home and stay in quarantine. So all these steps are being taken. So the answer to whether you can actually move or travel around in states, right now the trains available are only the special trains. So you will have to check with the IRCTC and with your state on what trains are going from your state to other states. Now, there's also a question on what all you can do, like during the lockdown, in terms of what you can do in public. So, for example, there have been questions on whether marriages can happen during this time. So, all marriage related gatherings can happen, but again, social distancing has to be kept, and only a maximum of 50% people can be there. Same in terms of funerals. Funerals can happen, but only a max of 20 people can be there. So, if you're doing your last rites or your funerals during your time, you can go ahead and do it. But again, social distancing norms and a minimum number of people are a requirement. Now, there are many shops that are open now selling liquor, pan, cigarettes, etc. All these shops are allowed to run in, like, especially in areas like green zones, orange zones, and in certain areas in red zones. But again, there has to be like all the people there will be following social distancing guidelines, and there will be police authorities to ensure that this happens. And now wearing of a face mask has become compulsory in public places. Like, for example, Delhi has passed an order saying that if you don't wear a face mask, then you may be punished. Then any person in charge of a public place or transport has to ensure that social distancing happens. Social distancing is there are these set of guidelines with the Ministry of Family Health and Affairs on how you can distance yourself healthily to prevent contact, so that you don't actually end up getting or transmitting coronavirus. These are very important guidelines which you can definitely check out both on our website and on the Ministry of Family and Welfare. Apart from that, spitting in public places is also punishable in many states like Maharashtra. So you should check with your state. You should definitely not do this, because the police can catch you and you may be fined for it. Apart from this, there are a lot of questions on workplaces and what employers are supposed to do during this time. I think there's a lot of confusion going around on what steps they're supposed to take, even when they bring in 33% capacity of people into the office. So, as of now, when these number of employees are in office, the employer has to ensure a lot of things as per the national directive that's been given with the guidelines on the 1st of May. Some of them include wearing a face mask, which has been made compulsory within the office, and all persons have to again put out notices about social distancing, make sure their employees follow these guidelines. Then provisions for thermal scanning, hand wash, sanitizers with touch-free mechanisms have to be ensured. This is something that they have to try and do. Then any person above the age of 65 or persons with comorbidities, pregnant women, children below the age of 10, all of these people have to stay at home except for essential service requirements and health purposes. So if any of these people are there at office also, it's advised, the directive advises them to stay home. Large physical meetings in offices are to be avoided at this point, and each employer also has to put out a list of clinics, OPDs and medical centers which are nearby, which are treating COVID related patients in case there is a situation that comes up. This is for the benefit of the employees and the employer himself. Then arrangement of transport, if it's being made, should again be made with social distancing guidelines so that there's no overcrowding. And again, good hygiene mechanisms are now to be ensured in workplaces. And apart from that, frequent sanitation and cleaning of the workplace is one of the key highlights of the national directive. This also includes cleaning minute things such as door handles in between shifts, and also common facilities like lunch rooms, coffee rooms, etc. Apart from this, if you have any doubts on what happens in red, green and orange zones, please come to our website, drop us a question on the Ask Nyaya tab, drop us a question on this chat itself as a comment, and we'll be able to get back to you. Please follow Nyaya on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and if you have any more information that you would like to know about, please get in touch with us. It was great talking to you, all of you.